Hello and welcome to Frontline Conversations with me, Amit Baruah, your host for this episode. Lots of action has taken place between India and Pakistan, ending in a ceasefire at 5 p.m. on the 10th of May. Many international actors have been involved in this whole process. A lot of people are claiming credit that they did this, they did that. Of course, America and President Donald Trump, are right up in front on that credit score. But there are others, including the Saudis, who claim that they also played a role in all this. So there's a lot of discussion in India and in Pakistan and, and those who are interested in South Asia as to what this latest escalation between India and Pakistan means. This analysis is going to go on as some of the forces are still in play. But specifically, what does this mean for India-US relations? President Trump has spoken by some counts, at least on 7 occasions in the last few days, taking credit for what has happened between India and Pakistan. He's talked about nuclear fears. He said that, I'm not getting the credit that I should get. He said all kinds of things. He's talked about trade, many, many things which he's spoken about. And just a short while ago, I was reading in the text of the interview to Fox News, President Trump has said, and I quote, "I'm using trade to settle scores and make peace." So what does this all mean? Being thought that India-US relations are on a really strong footing. But now we see a more equalitarian treatment between India and Pakistan. Or is that really the case? So to discuss this, we are joined by Navtej Sarna, former Indian ambassador to the United States. He was our envoy to Washington when Trump was in power for his first term. He's also served as India's High Commissioner to the United Kingdom, as India's ambassador to Israel, and for 6 long years, he was the spokesperson of the Ministry of External Affairs here in New Delhi. Welcome to Frontline Conversations, Navtej.
Thank you, Amit. Thank you.
Navtej, the first thing that I want to ask you, how seriously should we be taking President Trump as he makes all these claims? Is it posturing, or is there something more to it than what he's projecting?
Well, Amit, it's difficult to say that you don't take seriously the most powerful man in the world. And I don't think anybody is going to say that. At the same time, I think you have to factor in Mr. Trump's personality. You have to factor in his history of making statements, his desire to be at the center of everything that's happening around, his claims that he is the greatest deal maker, his aspirations to be the great peacemaker. So if you put all that in, I think a lot of his statements can be explained, particularly based on his personality and the nature of this administration of Trump's second term. So I think we cannot say that to his face or openly that Mr. Trump is not correct. I mean, that would not be a wise thing to do, I would say. So much of it is allowed to go unchallenged at one level, but then slowly there is a pushback on everything, as we have seen from the statements by our Foreign Office spokesperson, by our External Affairs Minister. So, we are slowly restating positions for the record. So you can't ignore these statements completely because you have to put your position down. You also cannot challenge these positions because he's the most important man, and it means you don't want to slight the President of the United States. So it's not an easy googly to play, but that's where we are.
So in essence, you're saying it's a bit of a tightrope walk. Is that what we are doing?
Yeah, I think it is a tightrope walk in not on substance, but in tactics.
So India over the years has invested a lot in this relationship with the United States. Successive prime ministers, not just Prime Minister Modi. It's been an incremental increase in a sense in the embrace of the United States. So given Mr. Trump's personality, and as you rightly pointed out, he is the most important man in the world, and you have to take him seriously. I mean, is this investment, is it misplaced? Is it going to give us the returns that we expect it will give?
No, the distinction, Amit, in fact, is in your question. You said we have made investments in the relationship. We have not made investments in one president alone. So if you see the India-US relationship, it has been steadily growing since the time of President Clinton. And you've had Republican presidents, you've had Democratic presidents, and you've had major changes in government in India during these 25, 27 years. Let us say, if we take as the watershed moment our 98 nuclear tests, which is, a convenient and a very logical watershed in my view. After that, it's been a steadily rising graph. And it's not that occasionally we've not had points of difference. We've had, the F-16s or something or the other. We've had issues on which even Afghanistan, Biden's withdrawal from Afghanistan, India felt a little left out. So I think it's not been 100% on every count, but overall the relationship has been strengthening. It's been growing. It's been widening. It's been deepening. And there are a number of factors in that, which we don't need to go into in this interview. So I don't think the investment is misplaced. It is our most important relationship. It is crucial for India's development in the future, for India's development as a major economy, as a technological power, as a modern economy, as for our security, for the next level of technology in defense and security. So I think the relationship is on a broad basis. So I don't think we need to think that we've made some great fundamental mistake just because Mr. Trump makes a few statements. I mean, in his first term, we made a lot of gains on the strategic and defense side. And yet in public perception, every time he said Harley Davidson, we thought the relationship is going into an abyss. But, that was not true on fact. We signed the foundational agreements. We moved up the strategic trade authorization. We became part of the Indo-Pacific. We got the revival of the Quad. So, we did move a lot on strategic and security and defense terms. But we didn't do so well on the trade aspects. Now, similarly here, I think we have to ride this one out. I don't think we should begin to question our fundamental strategic partnership with the United States.
Navtej, coming to the here and now, I mean, with your vast experience of diplomacy, I mean, it's obvious to any observer that telephone calls were made by American officials to Islamabad, to Rawalpindi, to New Delhi. I think that goes without saying. Any observer or any analyst would understand that the ceasefire didn't suddenly happen when the Indian or the Pakistani DGMO picked up the phone to speak, or the hotline to speak to his counterpart. So tell us, we've had a long history of American involvement. You mentioned 98, the nuclear tests, when the Americans were really angry with us. But by 99, the next year, when the Kargil conflict happened, the situation had changed. And the fact that Prime Minister Vajpayee chose not to hit back and confine the conflict to removing Pakistani intruders from our side of the line of control, that won India a lot of dividends. And in the end, Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif was forced to fly down to the US and sign a climb down agreement with a vague promise of personal interest from President Clinton to sort out this or that. So the question that I'm asking is that American involvement, making phone calls, being in touch with India and Pakistan is not new. So for our viewers, can you tell us the distinction between having contacts, making suggestions, and that word which we don't like, the M word, mediation?
Amit, I'm glad you raised this question. It's a very important distinction. And I think if we can make that distinction, we can also, we will not be getting so hot under our collar at these statements. There are two aspects to it. One is, as you say, when there is a crisis situation anywhere in the world, telephones are, a normal thing of communicating, of giving your side of the narrative to your partners, to your even to people who you may think are just fence sitters. You want to explain why certain things are happening. In fact, our foreign minister was also, as you see from his statements, made several calls at different stages. That doesn't mean you're either seeking help or you're seeking mediation in terms of the fundamental issues involved. And there are any number of scenarios that have come up, which you said, who called whom. We know the Pakistani DGMO called our DGMO, but before that, what made them do it? Was it the Rubio call to Pakistan? Was it Pakistan flashing its nuclear card that alarmed Washington? I think then any number of scenarios, but whatever the scenarios may be, the fact is that this was just a cessation of hostilities. Some country claiming credit for saying, oh, we helped because we made a few phone calls. Now, we can differ even with that. But if we put that aside, this is just, a kind of extended parallel to what happened after Kargil. After Kargil, Nawaz Sharif was called to Washington, D.C., and it happened. And, you can see other analyses appearing in the Indian media that even after 2008, even after 2016, there were certain amount of alarm in other countries, in particular United States, and they were used their influence on Pakistan not to, but the influence has also been used in earlier things to sort of tell them to crack down on terrorism. The fact is that not enough has been done. But this should not be seen as the M word. The M word is, when a country sits down and says, okay, I'm going to help you resolve this problem. Some of Trump's statements are doing that. When he says, he said it in 2019, if I've been asked if you guys want, I can resolve this. He just sees this as another sort of kind of, real property arbitration, which he can, real estate arbitration, which he can handle. It's not quite that easy. And when he says, you can see the problems on facts, when he says there's 1,000 years they've been fighting, and so on and so forth. But this is not mediation in the sense of, say, a third country sitting down and doing U.S.-Iran talks. We are not there. So I think this is an important distinction. And while there are enough voices which were already coming out in the United States telling President Trump that, stay away from trying to resolve dispute between India and Pakistan. It will only lose you the strategic partnership with India. Not only that, it will also fuel terrorism from Pakistan, because every time something gets to that level, Pakistan enables terrorists to up the ante. So that voice is already appearing in the United States or speaking out. And so I think this is an important distinction.
Right.
And we must push back, like we have rightly pushed back that mediation doesn't happen like this. And ceasefire, as far as we are concerned, the Pakistanis called, and we accept it. And no country accepts, certainly not India, accepts a ceasefire unless it serves its interests at that particular moment.
So, Navtej, since we are on letters today, we've covered M. Maybe I'll postpone N for a little while, but I want to go to T, and that is trade. Trump and trade. I think these. He's been saying repeatedly that I've used I've used trade as a threat, but we really want to trade with India. We want to enhance our trade. We want to trade with Pakistan, and he's also saying that he's signaling very clearly that a deal is about to be made. We know an Indian delegation has left or is leaving to continue with these talks. So is this posturing? Is he trying to push India into a deal which is more favorable to Washington? Is that what he's doing?
But that's his constant effort. That's his constant. In fact, he's already said that India has agreed to zero tariffs on everything. So I don't see India agreeing to zero tariffs on everything in any case, but even without a negotiation, even before the negotiations have ended, I don't think that can be happening. So he does. I mean, trade is very central to Trump's worldview, and he's willing to give up a lot of other things for trade, and a very, very sort of basic idea of what he sees as trade. A basic idea of like, how much do you export to me? How much do I export to you? Trade balance. What is your tariff on this? What is my tariff on this? Irrespective of the fact that tariff situation or that trade imbalance may actually be helping the United States. So trade is very central to him, and he will try to make sure that there'll be all sorts of carrots and possibly sticks in terms of statements to make sure that he gets a good trade deal. Now, I think it's up to us to see where we have to draw these lines. Enough countries are doing it. And I'm sure when our delegation goes there, led by the minister, they will have a closer look at each of all these issues.
So we also saw, I just want to briefly bring that point in. With China, he imposed, 145% tariff, and then there was a climb down. And now he claims that he struck this really good deal with the Chinese. They've held talks in Switzerland and so on. So is there something for us to learn from that? I mean, standing up to Mr. Trump can also be helpful sometimes.
Well, I think the Chinese, of course, we are not quite in the same situation as the Chinese. And the Chinese have been seen as, at one time as a major competitor, a major adversary. At the same time, there has been this sinking feeling right from the beginning of this administration that, Trump really wants to make a deal with China. That basically what he's looking at is not permanent competition, but a big boys club. He admires Xi, he admires Putin. And, whether he's looking at deals in which they can sort of have their zones of influence and carve out the world, that is one belief of many scholars. So I think we have to see that, we will have to be firm on what we need to be firm on. Where we can give, we will have to negotiate. Some of it may actually be helpful for our own, increasing our own competitiveness. So I think we have to take a balanced view of this. You can't just stand up to him without a ground. But if you have a good ground, then I think India has a long history, particularly in trade negotiations, of being very firm. So I think a certain amount of firmness helps because he's not going to give us credit for being very soft.
So is this, I mean, what his statements are about taking credit for, resolving this, cessation of hostilities. So is this as much about trade as it's about his or his administration's role? How do you see that?
I think he likes to announce victories. And he hasn't had many in terms of Middle East or Ukraine so he likes to announce victories. He likes to announce big deals. He likes to, he sort of, you can see
But the problem seems to be he wants to do one like every day or every hour virtually.
well, that's it. That's it. That it's nobody said that this is going to be a peaceful term in terms of the administration. I mean, I think we used phrase was used in very early on that, you know, make sure your seatbelts are on.
Well, I guess that's definitely one way of looking at it. So the other question that I wanted to ask you, from your perch in Washington, what did you see? What did you understand about Trump, which might be useful to understand because we have to deal with him for another, whatever, 3.5 years, and, a person who can impose 140% tariff, he can impose 320. I mean, he can do pretty much whatever he wants in a sense. So are there going to be any levers that sort of, as you rightly also earlier said, that the relationship is with the country, not with an individual president? So how does India manage this, in the rest of the 3.5 years ahead? Because there could be other crises in the subcontinent too, as we go along.
I think our people have, our people who are currently in the foreign policy establishment have had the experience of Trump 1.0, and I think they know how to manage his unpredictability. If there's any lessons to be drawn, it's basically that I don't think one should set too much store with relationship only with one part of the U.S. administration and only with one person, because he is essentially unpredictable. He is essentially transactional. So he will he can be very warm and very effusive one day, and virtually the same day he can call you tariff king.
Like, he's not happy with Netanyahu clearly these days.
Well, yes. So why at the same time he's let Netanyahu virtually given him a free hand to obliterate Gaza. So so we have to build, and I'm sure we are doing it. We have been doing it in the past. We have to build our constituencies across the United States, in the Congress, in the media, in the universities, in the industry. Very, very important, in the industry. And I think it is a multi-vector approach which has to be done while making sure that we keep on getting our story again and again back to him. Because, ultimately White House is White House. And, if your story is you need them to come crack down on terror, then yes, let's get the terror message out again and again and again, and in different ways. And I believe now delegations are going across and going to be talking about that. So we have to get back to him, but at the same time, we have to have a multi-vector approach. The other thing I might mention here is that we need to look for and build champions of the relationship within the United States administration. We had in the Trump 1.0, we had big supporters of the relationship who managed to stabilize things whenever things were getting too rocky because of the president's instability in policy, or but we must remember it is not a very well-defined administration. It is a bit of an erratic administration. We thought he had all the people that he wanted in place, but when the NSA is moved out, virtually demoted, then you begin to question that. So it is not a very typical administration. It's not a very predictable administration. So you have to keep that in mind at every stage.
Navtej, one of the other things which I wanted to ask you about, post Kargil, India's, decision to confine itself to the area which was affected by Pakistani infiltration, won us friends. In 2008, again, many of the options that have been exercised post Pahalgam were on the table. But at that time, the Prime Minister of the day decided not to exercise those options. This debate can go on whether it should have been done or not been done. But it did win us a lot of international support at that time. Now, it appears this time, and the fact that the delegations that you referred to are going, means that India needs to press its case more on this occasion than on previous occasions. So we were under the impression, or that's at least the public projection of it, was that Pakistan is an isolated country. There is that hyphen that everybody spoke about, is that hyphen is diluted or has gone missing. On this occasion, the Pakistanis, their reactions, welcoming the role played by the Americans, while we have maintained to some extent a silence about it, shows that they are gaining in confidence in projecting their own point of view. And India has long stressed and has got recognition that Pakistan is responsible for cross-border terror. And the admission, even on this occasion, that several members of Masood Azhar's family were killed in that operation, shows that there was merit in the targets that India selected. But the point I'm trying to ask you is that, is it so easy to isolate a country like Pakistan? You had many years of experience as, representing India at the highest level. So can you explain to us, how does this work? I mean, we can't easily isolate people. You can undermine their point of view. You can point to their flaws. But how does it work in practice? Can you tell us something about that?
Well, I think the important thing is that it's not isolation for isolation's sake. The important thing is, and that is what has worked on a broad level on Pakistan, is that there has been a recognition in most of the world that Pakistan does back cross-border terrorism, and certainly they've experienced it themselves. Forget the very important India connection. When you say names like Omar Said Sheikh, or you talk of Danny Pearl, and you talk of the fact that Osama bin Laden was harbored by Pakistan, it makes a lot of sense in New York and Washington. I mean, these are major studies, major stories where New York Times, etc., have been done on these issues. So the linkage of terrorism with Pakistan is fairly well recognized. The only thing is, it has to be kept center stage to show that why does India act in a particular way. Now, what happens is, when Pakistan tries to say, oh, let's have an inquiry, let's internationalize it, and at a very superficial level, it sounds very logical and very, very reasonable. And then the world says, oh, yes, these are both nuclear countries, we shouldn't spiral out of control. The world loses that connection to terrorism. And then what you see is a certain hyphenation. Now, that hyphenation, to my mind, at the moment, is not like it used to be 30 years ago or 20 years ago, because the realities on the ground have changed. Because India is a far more important country to the world because of our, economic potential, our economic success, our various other, plus points, as compared to Pakistan, which really looks like a basket case, even without the terrorism angle. So I think that this hyphenation is short term, and soon I think the world will go back to looking, if they really want an important relationship with a country like India, they can't keep on equating us with Pakistan. So, but nevertheless, the hyphenation does happen at a very superficial level. And this is Pakistan's intention, and always by flashing the nuclear card, is to, yes, like we are two nuclear countries, so please come in, and that's what they want. And that's why we resist that.
And they seem to have got it again. I mean, the kind of alarm bells that went off, it would appear that they did get it.
Well, let's see, what happens, because certainly at the moment, there were alarm bells of talking of nuclear was only President Trump. I don't think anybody else really came up and, talked to. Everybody has seen India, the way India has played its role as a nuclear weapon state.
And do you think that, say, as I was mentioning, that post Bombay attacks, Mumbai attacks, India got a lot of support from the international community. I mean, is it that if I may use that expression, the toolkit, the diplomatic toolkit that is needed, at a time of non-response, non-military response, and a time of military response is different?
Well, yes, I suppose it is different because your ground situation becomes different. But now India has decided that enough is enough. We've had enough of this, terrorism and coming, and we keep hoping for good behavior from Pakistan. Now, I think the government of the day has made it very clear that, there is a new normal.
So how, I mean, this new normal that's off-ramp, new normal, these are all, words that we are hearing. So I just want to know, in the long term, and you rightly pointed to the instability of approach that we see often from Washington. I mean, so how does the United States cope with this new normal? Because we do know that terrorists still operate in Jammu and Kashmir, that they're still being sent from across the border. And God forbid, if something else happens, how do you think Washington will respond?
Frankly, I'm more worried about how, India should respond. And India will respond in a particularly strong way whenever there is, I can't predict what kind of a scenario will unfold and how India will be. But I think the clarity is there that if there is a terror attack which is seen as being propagated by Pakistan, then we will equate Pakistan and terrorists, and it doesn't mean that, and it will be seen virtually as an act of war. Now, this is a message which should be backed up with international support. It should be backed up in organizations like the FATF or platforms like the FATF, because terrorism cannot just grow. It needs an ecosystem around it. And Pakistan has to be called to task in different places. I mean, they didn't do very well in the United Nations Security Council at this time because the world knows the reality. I think that message has to be stressed. And, and once again, a broad consensus has to be built on Pakistan as a supporter of terrorism, and therefore as a country which needs to be sat upon on this particular issue. And I don't think anybody is objecting to the way India has reacted, because today every country is very certain that they will, if there is an act like this, then it purely to protect your own citizens, you have to take action.
Well, we'll leave it here for this episode of Frontline Conversations. Thank you, Navtej Sarna, former Indian ambassador to the United States, for talking to Frontline. And I do hope you will give us another opportunity to speak to you, to get your insights and analysis into whatever's going on, not just in the subcontinent, but in the United States. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you very much.